A very beautiful morning to all our online audience, the guests that we have online, together with the physical audience here in Gaborone region, who have tuned up to our public lecture that is entitled Open Schooling for Girls. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture to introduce various guests that we have today. And I'll start by introducing our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Student Services, Dr. Goodson Gacha, who has served extensively in distance education, both in Botswana and abroad. Thank you, DVS, for coming. Within our midst, we have our Director for SADC CDE, Dr. Mabaledi Seleso, who has also come to grace this public lecture. We have our invited guests from nearby colleges, universities. We have Baisaho University has sent 2 lecturers. They are seated right there. Thank you for coming. We have Buitakanelo College. They've also sent representatives. They're right at the corner there. We have our acting director, publication for Botswana Open University, Miss Naomi Sankoloba. She's also here. And of course, the principal, the host for this public lecture needs to be recognized as well. The principal, Open Schooling, Mrs. Maseho Bahopi. Without much ado, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to invite to the podium the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Student Services, Dr. Goodson Gacha, to welcome everybody. Your chance. Godson, Godson, not Goodson, Godson, mwana wa mudimu. Thank you, God. Thank you, my DVS.
Thank you very much, Director of this session. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning all who have actually logged in to participate in this public lecture online. Once again, thank you, Director of Ceremony. Please allow me to observe protocol. I do recognize the Vice Chancellor of the Botswana Open University, who might be online, and his executive management. Our guest and presenter of today's lecture, education specialist for open schooling from Commonwealth of Learning, Canada. I also recognize both staff who are here present and those who have logged in online, and our alumni. I do also recognize our invited guests, both attending in person from Buitakanelo College and Baisaho University, and all those other guests who have logged in online. I therefore recognize all the other dignitaries who are online and all my colleagues here present including the principal of the College of Open Schooling. I welcome all of you to this Open Schooling public lecture by a representative, as I have indicated, from Commonwealth of Learning. Commonwealth of Learning is our international partner, and this has been the case for decades. Commonwealth of Learning has funded us, has built capacity and capability in Botswana, not only at the Botswana Open University, and has done so again within the continent and across the Commonwealth member states. So, Doc Tony Mayers, you are most welcome to this regional campus. This is one of our regional campuses as Botswana Open University. Altogether, we have 5 regional campuses. One is in Palape, the other one in Francistown, the other Maung, which is 1,000 kilometers from here, and the last but not least is Kang, Botswana, where I served close to 7 years, which is very, very close to my heart, because that is the region that is actually serving the deeply marginalized learners from very remote settlement and other communities. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the lecture we are attending today is one of the highlights for our 2022 College of Open Schooling academic year. It is in significant ways very, very crucial for us as Botswana Open University or as the College of Open Schooling. It helps us to reflect and interrogate the sustainability of our interventions towards girls' education, the extent of our efforts in leaving no girl behind. It also helps us to reflect and interrogate how we unlock a better future for the out-of-school girl. It also helps us to reflect and interrogate the extent we are meeting the Sustainable Development Goal 4 in terms of targeting the education of the girl child. Bagaetsu, there are 132 million girls actually who are out of school globally. And the question is, as the College of Open Schooling and Botswana Open University, how many of the 132 girls around the world are we touching? Are we changing lives? Our College of Open Schooling is actually responsible for ensuring that all the out-of-school girls in Botswana participate in basic education and are enabled to progress to tertiary education and be empowered so that they can actually live sustainable, decent, sustainable livelihoods. So these are critical questions we should all reflect on as part of our engagement during this lecture session. The issue of any obtaining digital divide as far as girls' educational space is concerned in deeply marginalized communities or remote and difficult contexts is equally a critical issue to interrogate during this lecture on how promotion of open schooling helps the girl child to actually unlock her future. So the other questions that should help us to interrogate the lecture include: what are the latest technological or educational technologies that can assist to reach the unreached girls? And how do we decolonize the curriculum and make it more inclusive for girls to thrive in any learning space or learning spaces? Our curriculum at basic level, that is the junior secondary school and senior secondary school, needs to be decolonized. We cannot continue with a curriculum that is not inclusive. We cannot continue with a curriculum that literally marginalizes other learners across the country. I've taught in secondary school and I've contributed the history material for open schooling. And I have audited the materials. I'm not sure, Ramatebele, whether anything has been done. Because some years back, there were questions that were asking students in Hansi, in Gambawe, to write interesting a composition about a train from Gaborone to Francistown, when they've never even been to Francistown or Gaborone, let alone those from New Kade. The biggest village or town they know is Hansi, and in Hansi there is no train. Similarly, the other example that I always like to give is write a composition about an extravagant wedding at Buipuso Hall in Gaborone. And a student in Tsane, the only village that she knows in Botswana is Kang Botswana. And now you are talking of Buipuso Hall in Gaborone. Obviously, that student fails before even writing the first letter of that composition. Because the items that we develop are not inclusive. Similarly, the self-learning materials that we develop are equally not inclusive. I still remember one little girl doing JC in Masunga was asked to write a composition about the developments that are being made by government in Botswana to a friend in Australia. The little girl has never been to Australia, and what he knows is that the people in Australia speak English. This was a Setswana composition. So he decided, or she decided, to write in English, whereas it was a Setswana, because she wanted to communicate so that this friend of his, the pen pals, can actually understand what the Botswana government is doing in terms of development, building roads, clinics, and so forth. So I'm basically saying, let's decolonize the learning materials, the curriculum, and make them inclusive, and ensure that the test items and summative assessments are such that they accommodate everyone. If you say write a composition about a wedding, full stop, even a New Kade student will write about a wedding that takes place within his community or her community. But once you put Buipuso Hall, then even the Good Hope one won't actually pass. So I therefore once again, colleagues, welcome all of you who are attending this public lecture in person and online. I invite you to engage and interrogate issues that will be triggered by the lecture. Enjoy the lecture, ladies and gentlemen. Pula.
Amen. Thank you very much, our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Student Services at Botswana Open University. It cannot be said any better than that. Colleagues, they say if you educate a girl, you educate who? The world. If you educate a boy like me, you educate an individual. That's why in my home, there's no voting. I have 5 girls in my house. I can't vote, I'll lose the election. So the girl child is very, very important. Thank you, DVS. Very, very important. All protocol continue to be observed because we have dignitaries that are online and in our physical attendance here. So all protocol continue to be observed. Colleagues, at this particular juncture, I want to briefly introduce our speaker for today, who happens to be Dr. Tony Myers, from the Commonwealth of Learning. Others who pronounce his surname as Maize, not maize we eat, M-A-Y-S. Before I do that, let me just read the synopsis of the lecture for today. The Commonwealth of Learning is currently working on Strategic Plan 2021-2027, which was developed in collaboration with course partners across the Commonwealth. With respect to open schooling, the strategic plan emphasizes that in education, that in working with ministries and institutions, open schooling can contribute to advancing the goal of 12 years of quality education to be for every girl in the Commonwealth. The focus will be on out-of-school girls in sub-Saharan Africa. This lecture, colleagues physically present here and online, explains the focus, and it explores around some of the strategies which can be employed across the 54 countries of the Commonwealth. A question arises: who is Dr. Tony? Dr. Tony Mays is the current education specialist for open schooling at the Commonwealth of Learning in Vancouver, Canada, and also the managing associate editor of the Journal of Learning for Development. He completed his undergraduate studies in the United Kingdom and then started his career as a secondary school teacher in Malawi. Through a posting organized by the British Charity Voluntary Services Overseas in a school which supported both traditional full-time scholars as well as non-traditional learners registered with Malawi College of Distance Education. Dr. Mays has interest in teaching and learning through both contact and distance education methods. I've physically seen that through our interaction, as well as a combination thereof, continued throughout his subsequent career, which increasingly focused on teacher development through distance education, and then also about distance education in work with PROMAT colleges, Saidi, the University of Pretoria, and the University of South Africa. He has got a wealth of experience. He is a former president of the National Association of Distance Education and Open Learning in South Africa, former honorary treasurer of the Distance Education Association of Southern Africa, DIASA, and the former chair of the Biennial Distance Education and Teachers Training in Africa. Dr. Mays holds a doctorate in education in curriculum studies from the University of South Africa. What a bio. Very rich, isn't it? I thought you'd give him a round of an applause for that, because it's just amazing. We have the right person to deliver to us. Colleagues, we should remember that in open schooling, when we talk of open, in the context of open university, for example, open means no barriers to access. So today we are going to interrogate through this lecture, like what the DVS stated, the girl child and the open schooling. Dr. Mays, the stage is yours. A round of an applause. Before he speaks, allow me to also recognize in the physical audience the presence of our director, CIT, Center for Instructional Technology, Mr. Mulelu, is in the audience.
So dumelang to our colleagues who are present and to those in the regions who are joining us online. I feel honored today that you have invited me and are allowing me to, I just need to set this up, that you are allowing me to make this presentation today. The Botswana College of Open Schooling has been a long-time partner for COAL, and is very important to us because actually there are very few open schools in the world, despite the need. So part of my job is actually to try and get more open schools established. Because I think during the pandemic we realized that the pandemic was not the first time that schools will be closed down. There are other reasons why schools will close down in the future, climate change being one of them, and so we need to build more resilient education systems. So thank you very much again for the opportunity. Let me just try. To see how I can get this to move. So I'm having a little bit of difficulty today because when I was in my first country on this visit to the Gambia, my laptop stopped working because Microsoft discovered that I was in a different place from normal, so I have a limited access to what I can do. Let's start with a sobering thought. We've just begun to emerge from the pandemic, which affected us very severely for about 2 years. It was estimated that about 214 million children got only a portion of their normal learning during that period. Our partner countries are telling us that not all children have come back to school as we have reopened. And of those not coming back to school, too many of those, more than half of those that are not coming back are girls. You have to understand that in the context of what was the case before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, we had over 300 million children of school-going age who were not in school. Again, a large proportion of those being girls. Now we have post-pandemic. We've reopened schools in many countries, but again, of those not coming back, a significant proportion are girls. So our problem, our challenge has been exacerbated. This is why, in terms of our new strategic plan, we have a particular focus on open schooling for girls. And my particular initiative, as Dr. Gatcher has mentioned and as Dr. Hamaluba have mentioned, is to focus on trying to get more girls back into schooling, to get 12 years of schooling for girls, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, where we have some of the largest populations of out-of-school girls and young mothers. So this is my focus. It doesn't mean that I'm not working in other countries. I'm currently working in 11 of the 19 Commonwealth countries or Commonwealth member countries in Africa. I also have projects in Asia and in the Pacific, where I'm working with all 9 Pacific island countries, and also projects in the Caribbean. So at any one time, I'm probably working in at least half the countries in the Commonwealth. Obviously, I can't visit all of those countries in one trip, so I was very happy that I was able to fit into this trip our projects in the Gambia, Zambia, Malawi, Eswatini, and Botswana. I won't say I saved the best for last, but thank you very much for hosting us. So why is it so important? Why have we got this strong emphasis on getting girls back into schooling? I mean, that must be a question that comes up in everybody's minds. Why is it I'm not talking about boys? Is it because I don't like boys? I don't care about them? No, it's not that. Partly our focus is because this is a human rights issue. We strongly believe at the Commonwealth of Learning that all children deserve 12 years of schooling. But we recognize that for girls, it has been a harder struggle to gain that access. And we feel strongly that it should not be the case that one's sex at birth should determine your future prospects in life, what you can and you cannot do. So for us, fundamentally, it is a question of human rights. There are many years of neglect, of challenges for girls accessing and completing schooling that we need to address. It is a human right. However, not everybody seems to be motivated by the fact that it's a human right. So sometimes we look at more self-interest things. So the OECD, the organization that investigates employment and development issues, in their studies they tell us that if we could get more girls to successfully complete schooling and then to enter into economic activity, we would substantially increase the GDP of our countries. So if you're not swayed by the human rights argument, be swayed by the self-interest argument. It's good economics to get girls to complete schooling. Moreover, as has been alluded to, there is a multiplier effect when we educate girls. Girls who complete schooling are less likely to marry early. They tend to have fewer children and be in a better position to look after them. They are more likely to ensure those children in turn go to school and complete their schooling. It's a human rights issue. It's an economically sound issue. And we get an even better return on investment with girls. That doesn't mean I'm not going to help boys. It just means I have to go an extra mile to support girls. So, if that's the case, if it's a human rights issue, if it makes economic sense, why are we still struggling in 2022 with girls being out of school? Well, in some places, it is a question of culture and tradition. And in sub-Saharan Africa in particular, we still have a tradition of early marriages. It is estimated that about 650 million girls in the world today got married before the age of 18. Once they're married, their choices in life are often, not always, but often restricted. Sometimes their husbands will not allow them to go back to school or to complete schooling. Sometimes the sheer volume of family commitments that come with that marriage prevent them, even if they had support to go to schooling, they just can't manage to fit it in. So this is one of the areas in which we could make an intervention. If we can keep girls in school longer, help them to complete school before they go on and get married, when they're ready to move on, they have the open schooling that will open doors later in their lives to come into employment or to go into further education and training. Yesterday, after I finished my series of meetings with senior management and with the ministry, I was involved in a webinar organized by the Commonwealth Open Schooling Association and our chapter chair in Kenya, Professor Rotu Korea. She had invited two women to speak. One of them finally got her matriculation certificate at the age of 31. Another one dropped out of schooling, came back in, dropped out again, came back in, dropped out again, came back in, completed, then went on to do a degree and is now a teacher. So we need stories like that motivate. And I'm hoping that BOU, College of Open Schooling, will be collecting these kinds of stories, because that's how you motivate girls to come back into schooling or to stay in schooling. So this is one area where we can, if we can just influence some of our more traditional practices, realizing that the world has moved into a knowledge economy. If we're going to be active in the economy, we need to complete schooling in order to open doorways and pathways to further learning. Another challenge, which I cannot believe we are still facing in 2022, is the issue of child labor. It is estimated that there are 152 million children involved in child labor. Slightly more boys than girls in this case. So we understand that in some societies, families are struggling, children are put to work to try and help the family survive. In some cases, we have a large population of orphans who the only way they can support themselves is to subject themselves to child labor. These young children do not have an opportunity to go to school. The boys grow up and eventually they usually find their exit. But for girls it's harder. There's less of a support network often for them to integrate back into schooling or the economy once they do manage to break free from child labor. So it means nearly 1 in 3 children in the age of 6 to 14 who should be in school are not, because they are involved in just surviving. We need to reach out to these children in innovative ways to get them back. We have a growing incidence of poverty in all around the world, including in Commonwealth countries. There's a widening gap between the rich and the poor. If you're in a poor family, you're struggling to make ends meet, the chances are the little income you generate goes mostly to having somewhere to live, finding some food, and we don't necessarily eat every day, and in managing one's health care because you don't have a good diet, you don't have good living conditions. In those circumstances, families make choices about what they can and cannot do. And a family that has a mix of boys and girls may say, we can afford to send only one child to school. And the chances are, in sub-Saharan Africa, the child will be a male rather than a female. The reasoning often being that the female will get married and move out of the family in any case. So, if we can improve our economic growth and spread the wealth so that we don't have so many poor families, we maybe could get more girls back into schooling. So poverty is another big issue. And of course, if we can get girls to complete and get them involved in economic activity, as the OECD says, we then are helping to lift families out of poverty, and we can cut this cycle. And then surprisingly, still surprises me in 2022, that there are still schools that do not have separate facilities for girls. Obviously, once a girl reaches puberty, it becomes very difficult if the school does not have separate facilities that are properly equipped to support them. It's a simple thing. Why are we struggling with this? It's common sense. Why is it still the case? And even when we have after-hours classes, sometimes we choose centers that are not properly equipped to look after our girls. So it's one of the things that I was asked to give advice recently on Nigeria's outreach to out-of-school children and what we should have in our centers. So this was one of the common sense things I told them. Make sure you have appropriate facilities. And then this is an issue that has just been alluded to. If I look at some of the study materials that we have been using over the years, and I look at the examples and I look at the photographs, very often we are perpetuating particular stereotypes that are no longer the case. The notion that the man is the head of the household and goes out to work to support the family, and the mother stays at home, looks after the children, cleans the house, that's not a reality for most of us anymore. For most of us, to survive, mother and father both have to go to work. And it's often the case now that actually the mother can earn more money than the father. And so we're beginning to progress into a more democratic household. We share our responsibilities. And our study material should reflect this changing reality. It should celebrate the achievements of girls and women, because that will motivate engagement with the curriculum. If you think for a moment that there is a current NASA expedition to the moon, it's led not only by a woman, it's led by a woman who is from an indigenous community. Those are the stories we should be celebrating. We should be celebrating the fact that we have a growing number of male nurses and caregivers. We should be challenging these old stereotypes about how your gender or how your sex determines what you can and cannot do. Our study material should be part of that process. And when I'm running workshops training content developers, we will spend a whole day looking at these kinds of gender issues. And we've developed a set of guidelines to help content developers to be more sensitive. So I've talked about kind of why we want to do it. I've talked about some of the reasons why we still have this as a perpetual problem. The question then arises, is open schooling a way to address these issues? Well, certainly open schooling has always been about improving access. It shouldn't matter who you are, where you are, what age you are, what sex you are, as to whether or not you can access and complete schooling. Whatever we can do to improve access, we should do. That also means being a bit more flexible about the curriculum, about what learners study and how they learn. So flexibility and choice are an essential component for access and success. In some of the countries I work in, there has been a tendency to want to replicate the traditional day school approach for out-of-school children and youth. So you register in September for 10 subjects, 2 years later you write exams in 10 subjects. That is not a good model for people who have not had a good experience of traditional schooling. Rather let them come in, take one subject at a time, write it off, get a micro-credential. When they're ready to do another subject, let them come back, do another course. If you think about it, for an average school subject, it's 40-week year, about 3 hours a week, about 120 hours of learning. If I'm out of school and not working, I can do 120 hours of learning in 3 weeks. Probably I have got some other commitments, so maybe 6 weeks to 2 months. So why do we insist that you must start here, you must end here as though you were in a day school? When you dropped out of the day school system because it was so inflexible, because it didn't meet your needs. We need to be much more open to allowing these kinds of learners choice. But we also need to think about the curriculum that we offer. These learners are 18, 23, sometimes older, 31 in the case of the lady we was talking to yesterday. Giving them the same curriculum we offer children is just really not the way to go. We should have a more mixed curriculum. Yes, they need language skills. Yes, they need some basic maths, but they also need courses that will enable them to either find employment or self-employment. So one of the projects that I have in open schooling this year is about vocationalizing the curriculum, supplementing the more academic with things like hairdressing, entrepreneurial skills, business studies, whatever, something that can help girls to make a living, young mothers to make a living. Of course, when you start moving in this direction, we're working with a teaching force that is used to physical classrooms. They're not used to developing these kinds of curricula, developing this kind of content, developing systems to support learners in these kinds of flexible ways. So there's a whole necessity for us to manage the quality of what we're doing, to offer capacity building and support before we start offering this content and these courses. So quality becomes a huge issue. We need to be careful that we don't just put out a whole lot of stuff out there that is not very good, because that will just undermine what we're trying to achieve. We need to be more flexible about pace. Young mothers may have children, one of the children becomes sick, they may drop out for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. We shouldn't make a big hassle for them. When they come back, we should say, let's sit down, let's talk about how we can help you catch up. They're not children. They're now young adults with responsibilities. And our system should be flexible and adaptive and responsive enough to help them. And then, of course, cost. Cost has always been a barrier. Even when there are no school fees, there are costs. In the traditional school system, you might have a no-fee school, but learners may need transport to get to that school. The school may require a uniform. The school may require that you buy additional textbooks. Sometimes you have to buy your own stationery. So even if it's a no-fees school, there are still costs. And we have to be very careful in thinking about that in offering open schooling. Because if we digitize too fast, too quickly, we may be, as we discussed in a meeting we had earlier, we may be increasing the divide. Because there are costs of devices, there are costs of internet, and so on and so forth. So what I'm advocating is, as we digitize the curriculum, we do it in such a way that content can still be printed for communities where that is necessary. That we have, for people who have devices but no connectivity, we create open textbook versions that have some multimedia in, that they can come to a school that has been Wi-Fi connected, download that content once and go away with it and work with it offline. And for those who have devices and connectivity, we can use the same core materials to support a more online engagement. So we need to be more flexible in the ways in which we offer. In any one country, we probably need to address all of these different needs. So we design with that from the beginning. So when we're thinking about how we're going to support girls to come back into school or young mothers to come back into school, we need to do a very careful costing. Not just the costing for the institution or the ministry, but what is the cost to the learner? And how can we help to lessen that cost? Having said that, it should be clear by now that there's not a one right way of doing this. So let me give you a couple of examples. The largest open school in the world is the National Institute for Open Schooling in India. NIOS has gone a long way towards digitization. The government has sponsored a platform that allows institutions to develop online courses and massive open online courses. So they've gone a long way towards digitization. Doesn't mean that in some areas, in some states, they still don't have print and contact. But it does mean that a growing number of teachers and learners are working in the online space. When you go online, exciting things become possible. If you look at this example here, in one single cohort, so one registration, one course delivery to completion, NIOS trained or retrained 1.4 million teachers. One enrollment. Obviously, lots of decentralized online support. You break them into groups and so on. Each state in India has an open school, all affiliated to NIOS in the center. So NIOS helps with the central content development. The support is disaggregated to the states, and those state-level open schools support a network of ordinary schools like your study centers. So you build this kind of hub and spokes kind of model. But once you go digital, you can do all sorts of exciting things. You can really talk about scale. But of course, it's not always possible to do that. During pandemic and post-pandemic, we've seen a resurgence in the use of broadcast technology, radio and TV. I supported a little project in Kenya with Elimu TV during the pandemic. We developed a whole lot of short 8 to 10 minute long videos, each based on a topic and curriculum based. We broadcast them to about 150,000 people for each broadcast. And there was a little phone-in option so that learners could, after the broadcasts, raise some questions, they would be answered on air. But it's not enough you don't do that once. What you do, and what we did, we backed them all up on YouTube so that learners who missed the broadcast could access them. So that learners who didn't quite understand could watch them again. In the first couple of months, there were 35,000 views. By the end of the year, I stopped counting when I got to 225,000 views. I had to count because it wasn't my YouTube channel, so I don't have access to the Google Analytics. I actually literally have to go in with a calculator and add all the views. So the nice thing about digitizing in this way, especially your video and audio recordings, and I visited the studio here yesterday, at headquarters yesterday, is that those resources can be used again and again and again, and learners will access them again and again and again. And that's another reason why you should have quality control, because you don't want you don't want an error being perpetuated in perpetuity. So sometimes you can use broadcast technology. Sometimes, however, you have to go to the girls. I have a little project in Nigeria because I was worried. You know, Nigeria for a long time has had the largest number of out-of-school children, and many of them girls. When I started talking to them in 2018, they had over 10 million children out of school. 10 million. What's the population of Botswana?
2.3.
No. So 4 times the population of Botswana, to put it in perspective. They've invested heavily in building new schools, getting new teachers, refurbishing classrooms. They think they've got it down to about 6 million. What was the population of Botswana again? 2.3. So 3 times. You can see the challenge. This is huge. So we wanted to understand, and there are learning opportunities. There are pathways. We wanted to understand, is there a reluctance in Nigeria for sending girls in particular to school? So we worked with the University of Nigeria. They went out on their motorbikes into these rural communities. They interviewed parents, they interviewed teachers, they interviewed learners who were out of school to find out what it is they wanted. If we could create an opportunity, would they come back to schooling of some form? So they told us, we would like to learn about this, 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 and this. So we went away, and my team at the University of Nigeria, they developed these short print-based, not courses, but guidelines linked to the things that were of interest to parents and learners. Then they went back out on their motorbikes into those communities. They set up loudspeakers using narrowcasting technology that was solar powered to say, we're back, come to the khotla, one, come all. And we brought the parents in, we brought the children in, and you can see they're dancing here. They were so happy because we had reached out to them. So one of the strategies that we do need to think about, if the children can't come to us, we have to take the schooling to them. One of my favorite examples of that is in Bangladesh. As you know, Bangladesh floods substantively almost every year. So what they do in Bangladesh, they have boat schools. So the boat has a cabin that can have about 20 learners in. They've got computers in there, and it's all solar powered. There's solar power on the cabin roof. They go down the river, stop by a village, bring the kids on board, they have some lessons, they give them some homework to do, they get off the boat, they go down a bit further to another village. That's what I mean. If the kids can't come to us, we have to take the opportunity to them. This is why I'm so happy about the digitization initiative in Botswana, because it's a way we can get to more learners as we progressively roll out access to the internet. And then of course we do have those kids that even if we liberalize our schools, make them open and such like, it's still difficult for them to come, especially our mobility challenge. Very few of our schools were really designed for people with mobility challenges. Going online has helped these kinds of learners to work and learn in an environment that suits them. Digitized materials can be accessed by people with visual impairment because they can use screen readers and they can use screen magnifiers to access the content. In most countries, we have failed dismally to supply braille texts as substitute for printed texts. So we might need to kind of jump that. It means when we're developing video materials, we need captions. We need transcripts for those who have auditory challenges. Once you digitize, it becomes a lot easier to mix and match and change. I'm nearly finished. When you get this set of slides, you'll see there's a link at the top there to a little animation we created, because one of the things we need to do is to advocate that open schooling is a possibility. That's why you need your champions. That's why you need your case studies. This little animation, 2 minutes, is targeted at parents, at communities, at schools that are not sure whether they should help. Within the first month we had 100,000 impressions. So I'm thinking that Botswana Open University College of Open Schooling should be looking at this and maybe creating your own example to advocate, to come to open schooling, so that it does give you a reasonable chance of turning access into success. How much time do I have?
10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. So, I've talked about why we do it, I've talked about some of the challenges. Here is a set of strategies that I'm currently pursuing and I'd like you to engage with. First of all, decisions we make should be based on data. They shouldn't be based upon whims, impressions, political expedience. They should be based on hard and fast data. We recently published a study on out-of-school children in Africa that tells us we've made great progress in getting children of both sexes into primary schooling. We have been less successful in having them complete primary schooling, less successful still in getting them to transition from primary to secondary, and even less successful in the migration from junior secondary to senior secondary. In consequence, I think every Commonwealth country in sub-Saharan Africa has a large and growing number of young people who are not in employment nor in education and training. That's a social ticking time bomb. Because children, young people who have no stake in the economy, who can see no future for themselves, are so easily radicalized or turned to bad practices. It's in our own interests to help these young people, and particularly the large number of girls, because in all countries, when I look at the numbers for NEETs, the not in employment, education and training, girls outweigh boys. It's in our own interest to address this challenge. But it's not enough to rely on data. We have to understand the reasons, the causes. So I was really interested. A few months ago I heard that in Rwanda they had initiated an active campaign to follow up on girls and young mothers who had dropped out of school to get them back into some kind of schooling. It was an active government campaign that was devolved down to local municipalities. So I thought that's very interesting because I haven't heard that before. So I initiated a study, and my researcher, who now works for us at Cole, he joined us recently in teacher education, he went and identified a few schools that have large numbers of these young mothers who've come back into schooling. And he interviewed them to understand what caused the dropout, what were the factors that kept you out, what were the factors that helped you to come back in again. That study, I'm hoping, it's in copy editing at the moment, I'm hoping to publish it before Christmas. But let me just leave you with this quotation that really moved me. This was a young mother who was back in schooling who said this with tears in her eyes: "You have helped us to recover our self-esteem and to feel that our lives matter." That's what open schooling should be doing. Helping girls and young mothers feel that their lives matter. That's our challenge. So, you do your research to understand the problem. You talk to these learners to understand the challenges so you can design an intervention. Then you design an intervention and implement it. So my first example, I don't know who this fellow is here. He looks familiar. So one of the things we did is BOU, College of Open Schooling, realized that in the Kang region there was an under-enrollment of girls demographically and an underperformance of the girls who had enrolled. So then they went out into the field and said, what is the challenge? What is the problem? And part of the problem was that in the move to an online portal, some of these girls were not able, they either didn't have the devices or they didn't have the connectivity to access the online things. So you design a solution. You take all the stuff that's on the portal, you put it on CD-ROMs, or you put it on flash drives, or you do whatever you need to do, and you go and take it to them. You put it in every school, you put it in every study center, so that the learners can go to the center and download the stuff and go away with it. In Masai Mara, we had a similar problem. We were not reaching Masai children, especially girls. But in East Africa, you get these cell phone packages that work across different countries. And people tend to have slightly smarter phones, because in East Africa they do a lot of financial transacting on mobile. So we developed a mobile app for curriculum-based resources for those children. It's a slightly different solution. In another project in Kenya, we realized that there was under-enrollment and underperformance of girls in STEM subjects: science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So we said, okay, what we'll need to do here, we'll need to develop some guidelines for teachers in girl-friendly content development, girl-friendly teaching strategies. So help the teachers to help the learners to stay in school. And in Tanzania, I have a project on looking at alternative learning and pathways. How do we get these girls and young mothers back into some form of schooling, given that there are about 540 adult education centers around the country? It should be possible to get them back in somehow or another. So there's not a one-size-fits-all, and sometimes you might need all such strategies. It's not enough still. You need the data to understand the problem. You need to go and talk to the learners to understand their challenges. You design an intervention, you don't stop. How effective is that intervention? You need to monitor it, you need to evaluate it, and you need to use that information to improve. Continue what works, improve upon the things that can be improved on, and do different things for the things that don't work. It's a continuous cycle, it's not a once-off event. So monitoring, evaluating, improving should be part of the strategy. The example I'm giving is a published case study from Mozambique, where we've just completed a pilot in 15 schools spread across the entire length of Mozambique, and you know how long Mozambique is. So don't stop. You've done an intervention, monitor the intervention and improve it. And then don't stop there either, because you will have learned something from monitoring and evaluating about what works and doesn't work. Don't keep it to yourselves. Share it with me. Share it with the Commonwealth Open Schooling Association. We can learn from one another. Dr. Selitso here from the SADC Center for Distance Education. This is where she and I can cooperate to share these lessons of experience. In this particular example, I'm using an example from my colleague Francis Ferreira's Girls Inspire project. If you have time, just go and click on the COL website, Girls Inspire. She does amazing things to affirm the role of women and the importance of girls completing education. So that's it. That's all from me for now. I'm open to questions, comments, and such like. And I thank you for your attention. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Wonderful, isn't it? It's wonderful. I think that round of an applause was not enough, Doc, for you. You have done it. No! Yeah. Wonderful. Now, allow me to also recognize in the physical presence our host, Acting Director, Masingate. She's here with us. And of course, you are all aware, our DVS is still here with us. Our DVS is sorry. And you're not going anywhere. Right. So, we are also grateful. Like we mentioned earlier on, Buitakanelo College is well represented here. Vaisaho is well represented. Now, if you have a comment to make, our mic does not allow us to come that side. Anybody who has a comment, come over here. Please. We have 3 minutes for that. Just come and make your comment. We are very friendly people. Good.
Dr. Mess, I would like you just to share the scenario of boys in the Caribbean and in Lesotho, because they are equally of concern. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Katcher. Everything I just said actually does not mitigate in any way access to boys. Having quality materials, having quality support processes also improves the quality of the learning experience for boys. So I'm not saying that we're not addressing the needs of boys specifically. The same kind of processes we need to go through. But for this particular strategic plan period, I'm acknowledging that for girls we have to go an extra mile. But yes, it is the case that in the Caribbean they're reporting that they have a problem that the boys drop out. So that I have 2 projects in the Caribbean that are trying to address that. I had a third one, but they seem to have gone on a different trajectory. So yes, I am also addressing the question of boys.
Thank you, DVC, for that question. Colleagues, we have learned a lot, and let's continue learning. Remember, in the context of software, when you talk of OER, we mean no barriers to use. So when you talk of open educational resources, in the context of software, no barriers to use. And it's just very important that as academics, we should be publishing in open journals, for example, open educational resources. CORE supports open textbooks, for example. He just told us. UNESCO supports OER through open textbooks. So out there, this is the era where we are. To support our children, we need to open up education, open the barriers. As Botswana Open University, we are living for expanding access. Not only do we give any education, but quality education which is quality assured. So, for the sake of our online audience who are not members of BOR, for example, please check what we offer. We have a lot. One of the universities that live for excellence. We are here to deliver quality. Any comment from the physical audience here? Waisaho, do you have any comment to make? Good, come forward, my sister. Wonderful. I'm sorry you have to walk because our mic. Thank you.
A very good morning to everyone.
Yes.
I just want to appreciate Bo for this invitation, and I want to thank Dr. Tony Mays for this wonderful presentation. It's an eye-opener to us. And I am part of this community as well. I just finished my postgraduate certificate in quality assurance from Bow University.
Oh.
And so I belong to Bow as well as Baisao University.
Good.
Together with my colleague here, she graduated last year, and I'm supposed to be graduating this year. And also, I just want to say that we are also developing our strategic plan for the next 5 years as Baisao University. And this is where we are going as well, because we see that there are lots of learners that are left behind when we bring education. We close education to the 4 walls of the classroom. So we are really interested, and we would not mind collaborating with COL and with BOU to make sure that this is a realistic achievement for the girl child or even the young learners in Botswana and beyond. And by the way, I'm a Nigerian.
Oh.
Yeah, so you have spoken. I'm an inclusive person here today. Thank you so much for the presentation. And just like her, I'm emphasizing, I'm the acting dean of education for Baisao University. So I just want us to push this further to make sure that we achieve the goal. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Vaisaho. Buita Canelo. By the way, that's my wife. Come forward, girl.
Thank you. All protocol observed. Yes, mine, I think I didn't hear the doctor emphasizing on how we are going to work on the stigma part. Because naturally, these girls, once they drop out of school, they have a baby, they have done whatsoever out there, to bring them back to school in whatever form, whether taking the school to them or back to the classroom, is sometimes a challenge because of stigma. They think of what the next person is looking at them to be. So how are we going to work around that stigma, Doc? Thank you.
Thank you, Mono. Doc?
Yes, it is an issue. As I said, we're just about to publish a study from our interviews in Rwanda. One of the things that the young mothers said was it was nice for them to meet other young mothers, and they have kind of formed their own little community of support for one another. So if we are welcoming as teachers, if we create spaces for them to support one another, and if we address up front as we're moving into this that there should be no stigma. We should have discussions around this. Things happen. Why are the boys not kicked out of school? It takes two. So I think yes, you're quite right. We also, that's also why I think advocacy campaigns promoting getting these young people back into school, and how it's good for our society to do that. It's good for them, it is good for us collectively.
You can now sit,
Thank
Doc.
you. Thank you.
Thank you for a good job. Thank you very much. Okay, the last one, yes. Thank you. We have 1 minute, 30 seconds. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mays. I'm Baranisi Mwalawa, Manager Open Schooling. My question that we are really struggling with, we have an issue with motivation. Normally when girls have dropped out, or young mothers, they've got other issues that they attend to, that they put as priority. And here at BO, no matter how much we try, we always struggle with how they can prioritize, because there are so many other things that are conflicting. They are attracted by the things that are not so much important. But then how do you really make sure that you help them to understand that education is key? Thank you.
I think it's
Thank you. It's now exciting, but we have to move with time. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to say discussing issues of girls never ends. We can discuss the whole day, but I will be biased to just allow our host acting director to make her point, then also Dr. Mays. He can't just come all the way from Canada and we don't give him the chance. Her hand was up. We would have invited our online audience to comment as well, but they can put their questions in the chat section. Our technology is limiting us. At the moment, they are still sorting it out to have audio. So those colleagues of ours online, put your comment, put your question in the chat box. Our tech team will capture it. So Masingate, very quickly, less than 1 minute. Dr. Sifed, less than 1 minute. Then the doc, less than 1 minute.
Thank you,
Yes.
thank you, Master of Ceremonies. And let me say all protocol observed. Mine is quite a very short one, related to what we discussed this morning in my office while he paid a courtesy visit. We talked about being able to have policies and failure to implement them. That is a very challenging issue everywhere. We come up with beautiful plans, we have beautiful policies, but the implementation is close to a zero. Actually, during your presentation, thought about what we did sometimes back in Botswana, related to the girl child and education. Those girls who dropped out of school. We used to have a center, YWCA, Young Women Christian Association, which was there to assist. It's still there, but it never expanded. It was only confined to Gaborone. But we have so many other girls out there who could have benefited from this YWCA idea had it been expanded, taken further than to where it was. So I just wanted to say, what we discussed is still there. We just need to expand and implement the ideas and the policies we come up with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sfedi. 30 seconds. We have 5 regions, and some of our regional directors are also online. Yeah, I can see Makisa Mangmaun. So we have the whole university is participating. 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you so much. He's so harsh on us. Thank you so much. Mine is just in addition to the previous speakers. It's just to appreciate your lecture, to say that this morning we talked about change of mindset. I'm trying to link that change of mindset to the empowerment of women, because we normally talk on corridors to say that women are not empowered. It has to start from the grassroots level, isn't it, colleagues? So that at least we get empowered from the early age, so that at least as we keep on growing from the girl child to becoming a fully developed woman who is able to nurture the whole world, you are empowered with all the necessary skills to become the mother of the nation. Thank you.
Powerful. You don't just become a doctor for nothing. Powerful input. That was good. Well done, madam. Dr. Mays, you wanted to throw in something? Sure. Meanwhile, college open schooling principal, you get ready?
Yes, I think the advocacy also has to be advocacy to young mothers and girls who dropped out. We need to help them to understand the benefits of coming back in. If they're not ready now, come back in later. So that is why, for me, open schooling access has nothing to do with age. Whether you're 15 or 50, we should be able to help you. In terms of the outreach, it's going to be impossible for Botswana Open University College of Open Schooling to do it alone. So I think you're absolutely right. We need to set up a network of civil society organizations, NGOs, whom we can work with, who do a lot of the outreach for us, do a lot of the advocacy for us. But we have to make sure that the message is our message. And so that is why I'm saying develop a campaign, then bring your people in to say, help us to bring these girls and young mothers back. This is the message to convey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. Sometimes it's allowed to be a father. Is there anyone bending there? So you really wanted to, but that guy I saw he was ignoring. Is there anyone bending?
Yes.
Who? No, not you, mother. Is there anyone bending wants to say something?
I'm saying me.
Even you are bending.
Going
Oh, you're commenting again? Mother is always supportive. Is there anyone bending here who says, Nane kibata obuwa, matata hela, nevasan sole. Kimango bata obuwa se. Who wants to say something? They didn't point at me, my hand was up until I got tired. Sole Zalisoho. Tabiso. Anything? Nothing. Okay, colleagues. Thank you very much for this segment of the lecture. Your comments, your questions will go a long way in informing us on how we can do better for the girl child. Now, allow me to now introduce the principal, College of Open Schooling, Mrs. Maseho Bahupi, as she talks about one of the projects Open Schooling did for the girls in our Kang region.
I think thank you, Master of Ceremony, or Director Ceremony. Yes. And let me just say that all protocol observed, since I'm not aware of who is online, so that I don't rub people on the wrong side. Colleagues, I think mine is just maybe a continuation of comments for me to share with you what BO has done in this area in partnership, of course, with the Commonwealth of Learning. We had a small project for open schooling girls in the Kang region, as earlier mentioned by Dr. Mays, where we wanted to support students, girls, to be able to do well in business studies. And we might ask to say, why business studies? Actually, we had identified that a lot of students were not doing well in business studies. And we had, identified it as one of the subjects which needed interventions to try to help students perform better, in that area. So the SSPD, he had been, I had actually come up with a lot of interventions, the training of tutors, to help them in difficult topics in that subject. And when he finally got this opportunity from the Commonwealth of Learning, he then, grabbed it so that we could have better materials to support the students. And we were able to, through that project, we were able to, before I go there, the other thing was then why Kang? I think that one too has already been shared, that, Kang, it could have been Kang, it could have been Maung region, because those are some of our regions which have a lot of settlements, and therefore we have a lot of students who come from those settlements. So we were looking at that, and because of that, you find that there are also regions that maybe don't perform very well. I know that Maung is one of the regions that have been doing very well. But yes, Kang has also been doing very well, but it was one of those, when you look at the performance, was on the lower side. So that's why we said, let's start. So we were just starting with Kang, but we intended to, and we still intend to do that, to carry whatever has been done to all the regions. Because generally you find that in ODL, even in open schooling, I think maybe open schooling mostly, because I haven't observed that is the case with tertiary. you find that a lot of our enrollees are dominantly female. And therefore, it means that if they are not doing well, a lot of girls are because most of the students are females. So we then got funding from Paul, where we were able to produce materials. Firstly, we trained, we would say that some teachers benefited, because for us to produce those materials, we had to train teachers. And of course, we were always sensitive about, gender issues, to say even when we recruit and so forth, we need to know how many women are benefiting, how many, or females are benefiting, how many males are benefiting from that. But through that project, we were able to produce 150 audio lessons for 50 for commerce, 50 for accounting, 50 for office procedures. And in the end, these audio lessons were put in CD, and we were able to copy about 1,000 CDs, which were then distributed to our students in the Kalahari region and to the conventional schools. Almost all the conventional schools in that region were touched in one, about maybe 10 of them, not all of them, but most of them where we visited. So most of those audio lessons were on the business studies content. And as it has already been said, these were open educational resources that can be used by anybody. And then the other things that we didn't just take the content, we also brought in the counseling element of it. Mankolo, who was here earlier, worked closely with Dr. Hamaluba, where she was also able to, because like it has been said, there are a lot of issues that need, some counseling, we need to motivate the students. Like it was earlier said that, once they have dropped out, there's some stigma so it was to address, all those issues, including some of the life skills and even study skills, so that, they can be able to become, more of independent learners with time. And as we were reaching the community, I think some of the prominent community leaders were used. For instance, in Kang, we had Khosi Basadi Siponi as one of the people that were brought in, as a role model to be able to motivate these girls so that they can do better. And like I've said, a lot of, secondary school teachers, even students from the conventional schools, were also trained on Moodle, how to access, and they were shown the materials, because we feel that we have depended a lot on the Ministry of Education, where we are always going there to ask for facilities, and we use their teachers, but we never give them anything. So we really wanted to try to build a partnership with the conventional schools, because we know that, for us to go far, we have to work closely with them, and we also need to bring something in. So girls in the conventional schools were also trained and shown these materials. So colleagues, really, I don't want to take a lot of our time. It was just to share and also make those who might not be aware of this project to say we have, some materials that are available. I think they can be shared with even other institutions, especially the schools which are offering the same program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mother. when you educate a lady, a girl, you have educated Botswana, the whole nation. That's a powerful lady, isn't it? That's a powerful girl child. That's my boss. Wonderful. When you educate a guy like our DVS, you have educated an DVC. You have educated an individual. An individual. So girls are very, very important. Masingate is acting director for Habaroni region. She's giving us the closing remarks. Before moving to that portfolio, she has been a manager, tertiary, correct?
Yes.
Yes. The floor is yours. You have 2 minutes to close.
A second will do. Thank you. This is going to be the shortest closing remarks that I believe will go into the Guinness Books of History. Protocol observed, and thank you, Master of Ceremonies. Let me say, we do appreciate your presentation, Dr. Mays. It was quite informative, and we appreciate the information we received from yourself, and we hope to put it in use, because it will not be of any use if you don't try. Like my DVC has already said, there are, things we can do to improve the situation. As he mentioned, the radio online that is not utilized, because with that, we can reach quite a number of child out there to improve the situation that we are talking about today. Radio is one of the common media used, and it reaches quite a lot of people. As he said, if it can be heard in Canada, how about here in Botswana? It means everybody else can hear or access it. So let's say we will be able to take the information you've given us, you have shared with us, and incorporate it with what we have. As I mentioned, the other association that I know has been there for the girl child, YWCA, so that we are able to reach in a very positive manner a lot of our girl child. But as the Master of Ceremonies said, when it comes to discussing the issue of a girl child, so it can be the whole day, the whole year. It comes from afar. We are challenged to make it a reality now and get away from the theory, the plans, the policies with little implementation. Let's do it and implement what we plan, and we will definitely see the results. But let me appreciate everybody who is here, particularly our visitor, then the DVC, the principal of open schooling, and all the directors and everybody attending even online. We had a good day, and thank you so much.
Thank you.